right, hello everyone. Welcome to Songbook Watch Party. I'm Dominic Farinacci. It's nice to see all of you. Thank you for joining in on Zoom and on YouTube. Great, great. I hope you all are having a wonderful, wonderful day and evening, and we're really glad to be here week after week on Songbook Watch Party, and we appreciate everybody tuning in. And it's great to consistently see a lot of new faces here. Thank you, thank you. So, I'm gonna play something a bit. All right. Thank you. Thank you. And I have a question because as the weeks go on, we've been testing some different mics. Can you just let me know how that sound was to you? Can you comment in the chat section? I'm just curious to see how. Oh, good. I see some thumbs up. That's great. So I went through. Hello, Valerie. I went through best yet. Okay. I like to hear that. So we went through all of these expensive mics. I've basically had to spend my apartment rent on mics and audio interfaces and all of that stuff. And sure enough, I came back to the Shure 58 mic, which I've been using for years and years. And I think maybe this might be the best yet, as I saw Lauren said. Okay, great. Very clear and warm. Good to know. So I think we found the mic, at least for the time being. All right. Well, it's nice to see everyone. Tonight we have a very special show, and most of the focus tonight is on a production that I created with James Poling, who is a U.S. Army veteran. The production is called Modern Warrior Live, and it details his time spent fighting in Afghanistan and coming back home and dealing with readjusting to civilian life and all the challenges and all the growth that he experienced. It's a production that we put together a few years back. We've been touring all around the country, and it's a kind of a formula that we came up with in terms of bringing the arts and storytelling together in our own kind of unique way. In observance of Memorial Day, we've created a piece using that same structure that we're going to play for you at the end of this show. So we're going to get into kind of how this production kind of came to be and all of the different elements of putting on this kind of production. We have a lot of the key members from the cast here, including our director, who's the director of Songbook Watch Party, Emmett. I'm going to love to hear from him in a bit. So James is with us. Christian Tamber, who's been our music supervisor on the project, is with us. Evelyn Wright, of course, from my hometown here in Cleveland, is with us. We always love having her with us. And Lauren Schoenberg, who's going to be tuning in live from the Bronx. And actually, he's with us right now. So, Lauren, you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Lauren.
How you doing?
Good to see you. And
Good.
for those of you who haven't seen Lauren before, he is the founder of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. He's won all kinds of Grammy awards for his wonderful writing. He's an incredible saxophonist and pianist and band leader, and he's been one of my mentors since I first met him when I was studying at Juilliard. He was my jazz history teacher, and Lauren, I slept through most of your classes back then, so it's nice to actually have a conversation after school years later.
You're funny. But anyway, no. All kidding aside, I'm looking forward to this because I was kind of a fly on the wall. As you were doing Modern Warrior, and got to just observe a few times, what was happening, and you told me about it, and I met James, and it's really it's a unique thing. I don't know, you mentioned Juilliard, and I really don't know anyone. I mean, there's you and Adam Driver was also at Juilliard around your time, and he did a lot for vets. He was actually in the army himself, and what you're doing with this project is really unique. And James, like we were talking about it last night when we were talking, and what James, not only James's story, but the way he writes. All I can say is it's James. He has his own voice, and the marriage, so to speak, of his voice and his, anyway, him and you and your music and the production is really something. I'm going to play just a very, very brief little thing,
Yes,
and
please.
uh, and dedicate it to everybody who's listening.
Yes, beautiful. Thanks, Lauren. That was how deep is the ocean, right?
How deep is the ocean? How high is the sky?
Yeah,
And
that's a beautiful song. And I know that the one that I played, "Beautiful Love." I know these songs are go way back, right? And I know as jazz musicians, we learn a lot of this great timeless repertoire. And as jazz musicians, we love to take these songs and do something completely different with them. And that's I know kind of a key component to what we did with Modern Warrior Live. We wrote some music, but we also took songs from all different genres and generations and kind of reimagine them in this context, which we're gonna get into. And Lauren, I'm just curious. I mean, I know that. I mean, listening to Louis Armstrong. I mean, and countless others in terms of just taking popular songs of the day and doing something completely different with them. That's kind of a key to what we do as jazz musicians, right?
yeah. Although, frankly, I mean, the way I played that song, I think was pretty close to the way it was originally written. I don't know what I did. Well, different in the terms of adding different notes. Yeah, sure, and making each performance unique in jazz. And again, not to keep talking about Modern Warrior, but I've seen it about three different times,
Mm.
and I saw it in a small venue, then I saw it in a larger venue, and then I saw it broadcast, something that was broadcast from somewhere. I'm sure you know where it was from, but it was like a big show you did somewhere. And I saw it somewhere like that. And the interesting thing was how you and James, you keep the core of the show the same. But what changes every time, and what really moved me, was the time I saw it right around Cleveland, and afterwards there was the meeting with the veterans after. And I don't want to jump the gun here with what you plan to be talking about, but I'll just say that there were some pretty hard boiled vets there, I'll put it that way. And they were there with their families. And I remember some of them were from the Vietnam War. And there were a lot of tears and a lot of tears and joy. I don't know how to describe it, all this mixture that happened. And I imagine that every time you folks do Modern Warrior, it's like a jazz performance because, especially the question and answer period, it's never the same. So in that sense, there's a real intersection there.
Yeah, yeah, and I think of all the projects that I've been involved with over my career, this one has had the most pointed response consistently, show after show, and we're going to bring James on in a bit to talk about that. And
It's his story.
yes, it is, and that's why the response is what it is. It's incredible. And one of our key members of Modern Warrior Live is a dear friend, Christian Tamber, who serves as a music supervisor for the project and really was there from the beginning and helping to build this out. So, Christian, you're in Durham, North Carolina, right?
Yeah, man. Hanging out here in the Carolinas. All is good.
All right, all right. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I miss playing with you. I know the last time we saw each other was the Modern Warrior recording session, right back in March.
Yeah, that was the last trip I made. So yeah, that kind of etched in my mind. That was the last time I've been out of just this small town here. So yeah, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's great to see your vibes, and I love for those of you tuning in. If you haven't seen Christian or the two of us live, we always have a great time, on stage, and I particularly love his musicianship, both on the vibes and piano, and what he brings to arrangements and all that. And I love his approach on the vibraphone. So, Christian, I mean, we see this giant instrument behind you, and we love to hear something. And in fact, in the theme of reimagining songs, I love what you always do with this Beatles song. Which
Sure.
one is it again?
This is Eleanor Rigby.
Yes, I mean I know that. I just asked since we're on a
Makes
broadcast,
sense.
and it's supposed to seem spontaneous, but it's not right now. But man, I've always loved what you do with this. So check it out. Yes. All right. All right. It's fantastic, man. Great to seeing you play, man. I really miss I miss the time we spend together on the bandstand.
Yeah, man. I feel the same way. It's been challenging to be away from all my close friends. I mean, you said it right. The people that we get to work with are also some of the people that we most enjoy spending time with. Whether it's on the bandstand or off the bandstand. So yeah, man, miss you as
Yeah.
well, bro.
Yeah, you don't fit into that category, but I know what you're saying. Yeah, yeah. Man, oh, it's great. Great to see you. Thank you so much, Christian. And so I want to get into this song that you arranged as part of this production, but I want to put it in context. So please welcome next to the virtual stage the creator, co-creator of Modern Warrior Live, who this story is based on, and who so clearly and elegantly articulates all different facets into his journey. James Poling. James,
Hi, how you doing?
good to
Thanks for
see you.
having me. Yeah, thanks.
See some
Thanks. It's good seeing
claps.
everyone again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know it's been a while. Nice mini reunion here on Zoom.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it
So,
is.
sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, it is. And thanks for your kind words too, Lauren. I appreciate that.
So, James, I want to jump right into this version of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Before that, I just want to hear from you, and about once I reached out to you to start to build out this Modern Warrior show. I think, number one, why did you say yes to agree to do it? And what was the real kind of goal of what you wanted to accomplish through this initiative?
Yeah, I mean, initially this started for us with a music video, and before the music video, once I'd gotten out of the military and really kind of worked through my stuff and let myself grieve, and then started to build my life with the blocks that I had, I found that sharing this concept of post-traumatic growth was helpful to me, but it also resonated with a lot of other people. I think a lot of times, if you tell someone that this is what they're supposed to be, and that they're supposed to be the sum of these symptoms, that a lot of times that can really become prescriptive and limiting to them. So, as we started talking about the concept of post-traumatic growth and the idea of reframing the trauma in a way that you could grow from it, and saw the benefit from that, it became something that I enjoyed doing, but it also kind of felt like an obligation early on. So I was going to school getting a finance degree when our mutual friend reached out to me to ask to do this music video with you. And again, that initially kind of felt like an obligation, right? We met that night and we talked for hours about, the issues that I had with how I often saw veterans with similar situations portrayed in the media. We often saw them portrayed as damaged or as liabilities. And I didn't think that narrative fit. So out of that sense of obligation, we did that music video. And then I quickly saw how honest your whole team was. And from day one, nobody tried to shape what I was saying or attach any agenda to it. And I really appreciated that. And I think it quickly grew into the passion that I have for what we do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And I know I remember that first time we talked for like 8 hours straight. And I remember on the NPR interview that I mentioned what happened, and it didn't quite go over as I thought it would on radio. But I said, we hung out, we met at a bar, and we hung out for 8 hours, had some beers, and then you brought me back to your place and showed me your guns. So that's
Yeah,
like literally what happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I felt much better having the opportunity to bring that story up again at your wedding.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Yeah,
that.
you're
I
welcome.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've been a great inspiration, and I'm really excited at the end of this episode to debut the special piece that we virtually put together for in honor of Memorial Day. So this song that I'd like for all of you to hear is Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah. Maybe everybody is familiar with this song, whether we hear the original version or the Shrek version, or maybe you hear alternate set of lyrics in a church setting, which still is, I still don't understand. But anyway, I mean, it's kind of all over the place. But Christian, there's few songs in the production where we actually just kind of took it from another place and like brought it here. This is actually the only song that we basically took exactly what it was in another place and placed it into this environment without really changing much. And that's because of Christian's brilliant arrangement that I heard. Christian, I heard you and vocalist Clint Holmes perform this many times live. And I remember hearing your version of it while we were creating Modern Warrior, and I started to rehear the lyrics in a whole different way. and started to kind of break down every element of James's story within these lyrics. And I think in a big way, you know, big part, that's a sign of a great timeless song, is that when you can hear a song for what it is on the surface and then really make it your own and internalize it and make, you know, build all kinds of experiences and feelings around that same song in a different environment. So before we play it, Christian, I just got to ask, what was your inspiration for arranging it the way that you arranged it? And so that we can kind of put that into perspective as we hear this version.
Yeah, sure. So when I started working, you know, I've had a fortune to work with some really great vocalists, and some of the best vocalists that I've ever worked with do all the same thing. And what they do is when they sing a tune, especially a powerful tune or a song that is kind of has the gravity that a tune like Smile or Hallelujah has, they have the ability to internalize that lyric into something that they can personally associate the lyric with in their own life, right? They turn that story of the lyric into their own story. They still sing the actual lyrics from the song, but they've internalized that song and are associating that lyric with something that's occurred in their life or that they can reflect to. And what that truly does is it creates a whole different performance. You know, and this is something we talk with our students all the time about, you know, how to develop themselves into a melody or into a lyric. And when I first started working with Clint, he was one of the best, and still is one of the best vocalists that I know that have the ability to kind of do this. And when he said he wanted to do this song, I knew it really from the Shrek movie. I'm sorry that's some honest truth for you. But you know, when he said he wanted to do Hallelujah, I was like, oh, okay. And I started listening to versions of it online. And, you know, I noticed, you know, there's like a bulk of everybody just kind of doing it the same old way. Nobody's really doing anything interesting with it. And nobody really seems like they're telling their own story through it. And so when I sat down with Clint and he said, well, this is my journey through the song, and this is what this lyric means at this specific point. And he related it to something very personal within the dynamic of his family relationship and kind of a journey through his life. And the song has a ton of verses, right? And you can kind of cherry pick them and really build your own story with the tune. He's picked very specific verses, and when he sang it, after he had told me the story of essentially what happened in his life and the struggle that he was dealing with in his life, it felt like the song was about him. It felt like he had written the song. And so the lyric or the creation of the arrangement became this very intimate thing where I felt like I was rewriting the song for him, even though it already existed. So as an arranger, it really opened up this box of like, okay, well, we're not going to do it the way anybody else has ever done it. We still want to give it honor to what it is and integrity of, you know, making sure people are familiar with the song. But this is almost like scratching from a brand new take on things, right? And so that's one of I love doing that kind of work. I love working with vocalists like that. I love working with stories like that. And so this arrangement, this style of this arrangement gives it's a slow burn is what I call it. It starts from almost nothing. You're telling the story, you're going on this journey, and the music is almost it's just supporting the dialogue or that lyric or the story that's being told. And it's only towards that almost 3/4 of the way in that the song actually really starts to become one with the lyric. When we transitioned this within dynamic of hey, let's try this within this show, we started talking with James, and I said, man, this is the same thing. Like, we have the ability to select some of these the verses that we know. We're going to be able to take some of the ideas that I did with Clint on that arrangement, and we're going to be able to shape this perfectly so it really tells James' story perfectly. So
yes,
that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so let's check this out. And then James, I'd love to hear from you about what you kind of took from these lyrics as we kind of built it out. So we're just going to play a brief excerpt of this. And this is Chanel Johns, a wonderful vocalist who I hope is going to join us in a future show. This is from a recent, a performance a little while ago at Tri-C, the East Campus in Cleveland. Check it out.
There's a blaze of light in every word. It doesn't matter what you heard. Oh, you're broken. Hallelujah. And maybe there's a God above. All I ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you. And it's not a cry that you hear at night. It's not someone who's seen the light. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. I did my best. It wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth. I didn't come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord a song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah, hallelujah,
Whew. Yeah, Chanel is again has that. She gets it. She goes to that character place. She becomes the voice of James. She's one of those great vocalists that can do exactly what we were talking about. It's like she tells the story.
Yeah, that's for sure. And James, so listening to that performance, can you provide just a bit of perspective in terms of why that song and the lyric kind of resonate with a specific moment in your journey?
Yeah, I think the moment that we use this here in the show is highlighting my transition out of the military. And there's a lot of stuff going on for me personally at this time in my life. I think once you've been through enough fights and you've seen enough loss around you, you start to forget the fact that you might grow old, and you start to accept the fact that, okay, in one of these fights, I'm going to catch this bullet, or I'm going to catch this shrapnel, and that's going to be it. So you start living for the moment. Everything you're doing outside of those fights, you've become numb to, and you're not thinking about 10 years down the road. So, whether it's in fights and I'm not staying behind cover the way I should to protect myself, or it's back home and I'm doing 140 miles an hour down the interstate on a sport bike, or I'm out at there's you don't think about the fact that there may be consequences to these things because you're just living for that moment and the next day. Once I decided to leave the military and I started to think about things like, oh, what do I want to do 10 years from now? What do I want my family to be like? What is it, retire? I hadn't thought about retirement until I'd left the military. And all those things kind of came crashing down on me at a time where I wasn't prepared to deal with any of them. And so I really had to dig into myself and see who I was going to be moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just, for James and for Dom, I mean, both of you, I mean, Dom, you're the musical director and you work with Christian on setting these things to music. And for James, it's his personal life story that we're talking about. And I'm wondering, from James's perspective, what does adding music do to it? You know what I mean? What does that do to in terms of how you feel? And I'm also curious, Dom, on your side, what it feels like for the first time, I think, in your life or your career, to be dealing with something of this magnitude of actually taking someone with a real serious story and setting it to music. So I'd like to hear from both of you about that. But James first.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I think the music does a few things. Initially, in the creative process for me, it helps me refine my soft spots, right? Like I have an idea of what a memory was for me and what it meant to me, and I'll put that down. And in sharing it, I will try to do my best to do that in a way that's universal. So when people see what I'm saying, they can hopefully see themselves in it, at least somewhat. And then I'll send that to Dominic. And as the music comes back and we start integrating them, I begin to see that a lot of times what I wrote doesn't line up with how I feel. And I'm only able to see that because the music doesn't line up with how I feel. So then I have to go back to the memories and how I'm trying to portray them to make sure that they mesh. There's other times where there's a part of my story that might be too specific to me in a way that it doesn't really help bring people in the way we would like to, or there's a transition that's hard to work on, and I can hand that over to Dominic and he can musically transition, or help kind of smooth out some rough edges that might not work narratively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on the musical side, hearing James's story has provided, I think, for me, a lifetime of musical inspiration. And, Lauren, as you know, as a fellow musician, how, we kind of see the world through a different lens in terms of, the closeness that music has in every part of our life and our existence, and how important it's not like a thing you kind of turn on and off. And so, hearing James's story, trying my best to bring those feelings out through music. For me, I felt like it was a moment in my life, I mean, still is, since it's an ongoing production, that it's a moment that I'm really growing musically, I think, and maturing musically, and getting into all different kinds of musical influences that I've been interested in for years. But this kind of brings it into like real acute focus, I think. And it felt completely natural to do, and it was really challenging, and it was a huge responsibility that I felt that I really needed to do justice to. And it was a really good process to pass the music back and forth to James. James would come back and say, "Hey, man, I'm not really feeling this. This doesn't really, paint a good picture, the clear picture of like what I was going for here." And so I have to constantly, revise the music. So it's been a wonderful back and forth. And yeah, as musicians, this is kind of a lifetime of musical inspiration. And thank you for that question. The next song we'd like to move on to is actually a song that features another key member of the Modern Warrior crew, Will Blaze. And I want to just give you an example of one song, Battle Hymn of the Republic, how we actually reimagined this in 3 different ways, in 3 different contexts through the production. So that song we've all heard millions of times over the years. And I want you to check out the closing scene of Modern Warrior Live. And then immediately we're going to go to the actual virtual collaboration with Will Blaze and Lafayette Carthon on piano, which is similar to what we did at a different point in Modern Warrior. So here's the closing scene of Modern Warrior on Battle Hymn of the Republic. So that was the closing scene, and a moment that we're honoring vets who served across different wars, and that was a special moment because we collaborated with the VA in Cleveland, and had a group of vets from World War II all the way to today who came and who filmed their part for that production on the backdrop. And then we actually debuted the very first show we ever did privately, just for a handful of vets, and that was a special moment. But earlier in the production, here is what happens with a whole different version of that same exact song that you heard. And this was from a couple episodes on Songbook Watch Party a couple episodes ago that we did. So this is Battle Hymn of the Republic featuring Will Blaze and Lafayette Carthon.
Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage web, the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lining of marching on. Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Will is a special guy. And before we get to the Cleveland connection for Modern Warrior, James, can you just put in context where that happens in the production in terms of your story?
Yeah, and kind of similar to what I was saying before about the fightings and kind of living for the moment. One of the other things that I was struggling with, I'd grown up in a religious Christian family household, but once I was over there and I started seeing death on both ends, I would see people getting lucky on both ends, but horrific things. Children being blown up, with both sides being at fault at different times, and it was really hard to sit there and kind of maintain faith through that. So this moment in the show sits somewhat juxtaposed to where I was at that time in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. And the fact that you and I, a slight diversion here, you and I met here in Cleveland, and I know you're from Warren originally, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Warren. I know you spent a lot of time here in Cleveland, and that's where we met. And Will is from Cleveland, Lafayette, and many of the folks in the production actually are from our hometown here. And one wonderful vocalist we have with us, who's another resident of Songbook Watch Party. I'd just like for you to say hello, Evelyn Wright. Thank you for joining us, Evelyn. Oh.
Hello?
It is. Hello, there you are. Yes.
Am I? You can hear me?
I can hear you. Okay, great.
Okay, great. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so lovely to see you, and thank you for joining. And you have, I know I tell you this on every episode, you have been an inspiration to me, and I know so many artist on the Cleveland scene for since I was young, and since many artists were young, coming to hear you live in all different kinds of settings, and we appreciate your history and everything that you bring to the Cleveland scene.
Well, Dominic, I thank you so much for that. I'm sitting here reflecting, listening to all these beautiful pieces of work that you have put together. It's just astounding. I think about my dad. My dad was a veteran with the Korean War. And I can remember him telling stories how he was on the front line and there was a constant battling and shooting constantly. And he would have to lie around and eat around dead bodies. And he said the day that all the bullets stopped, it was complete silence. And mentally that affected him quite a bit. He couldn't really deal with the silence and all the people that were killed and maimed, as he said. So I heard those stories. So they kind of bring back a place listening to what you're putting together here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and yeah, this production has been, I think, humbling and eye-opening, yes, especially for somebody like me who obviously doesn't have any military background. I know my grandfather served in World War II, but I never really thought about what men and women have gone through for decades on the front line there.
Absolutely.
And the power of this production in terms of how it's translating to not only folks who have served and are serving, but folks like me who don't really have much, who haven't really thought too deeply about this whole thing. And ultimately, I think that's, and James, I know we talk about a lot that's kind of one of the goals of this production, to really, empower folks and inform, yes, folks. And that's a beautiful marriage between the music and the narrative. Mm-hmm.
And these soldiers should not be forgot. That's why I can't understand many times when they come home, there should never be a homeless veteran, period. That I can never understand that. When they go and fight for you and give their lives for you. but I listened to my dad, and he was affected mentally behind that. So he had some mental issues with that. Yes.
And James,
Yes. Hi.
yes. So what we haven't talked about yet, and I'd like to actually bring our director in from behind the scenes here. What we haven't talked about, and from that first clip you saw, the beautiful staging and all the different elements that surround the music and surround the storytelling. That's all conceived by a gentleman who Christian actually introduced me to. Said, man, I see what you're going for here. You got to bring Emmett in. So Emmett is our director here for Songbook Watch Party. And Emmett, hello, can we put you on for a second? Well, actually, you do that. You have to do it yourself. Okay, good.
Hey, everybody.
This is Emmett Murphy. Sorry, it says, will you see if you can turn up your, yeah, I can turn up a bit of volume a little bit so you can hear a bit. Okay. So Emmett, thank you for joining us. I mean, you have to because this is your gig. But I'm just curious because so far we've talked about, you know, James's story and the music and the arrangements and everything that surrounds it. What was your conception in building out the set design and the visual elements here?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on the show. It's very exciting
Of course.
to be on the front side. You know, as you mentioned, Christian Tamber, who is, you know, I've worked with Christian over the years, brought me into the project, and you know, he told me the story that you were trying to tell and how you were trying to marry this idea of sort of spoken word and music and theater. The basis of theater is all collaboration, and I think that anybody that's watching this show can see that this production that we put together is really bigger than any single one of us. It's a collaboration of a community of people that all got together and really rallied around James's story and his experience. And so that's the crux of what I was trying to focus on as a director. And when we had our first conversation, you know, it happened very, very quickly. And I literally wanted to get into James's head, and I wanted to, in a theatrical way, capture images and feelings and the state of his psyche, the damage that had been done to his body and to his mind. I wanted to be able to communicate complex ideas from battle and from his life afterwards. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is this idea of camouflage, that it's literally something that you use to hide something in plain sight. And so we started to riff on the idea of camouflage being kind of the sort of the interior of his mind, and we kind of built it out from there. A lot of this was sort of our necessity is the mother of invention. We had an incredible percussionist, Solar, who was an Afghani percussionist. And one of the things that he brought to the production, in the original production, was this idea that those Afghani percussionists play on a carpet. So we had to have a carpet. So now we have carpets, we have caminettes, and we had this idea of presenting multimedia and visuals, and we tied it all together with our incredible lighting designer, Garrett Kane, who came in and created these beautiful signature color palettes that kind of relate to synesthesia and that enrich the theatrical presentation. So without going too far in depth, that was sort of the original concept.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for putting together such a beautiful set. And you're directly to thank for me. Before I met you, I used to just have my horn and, you know, put it in the case and I'm good to go. I show up to the gig a couple hours early, all set. Now, James and I have to figure out how to get about 30 different Persian rugs, 150 pounds of camo net, and about 40 other things to each production. So I thank you very much for that, Emmett. Appreciate it.
You know, it's my pleasure. Anything that we can do to bring your story and your music to theaters across the country, it's my pleasure.
That's a great answer. Yeah.
The next show we make is going to be about me struggling to figure out freight shipping. So we
With
know.
the FedEx guy, right?
Exactly.
So FedEx. I mean, the freight shipping with FedEx was particularly difficult for the last show that was canceled, of course. But right, James, I remember you spent about 4 days figuring that out.
Yeah, it's good now. We're good.
Okay. Yeah, but that's good. This was very much a grassroots movement, and thanks to a lot of folks who really supported us from the ground up. So the Modern Warrior clips that you've seen actually came from a Kickstarter campaign that we started to help to generate funds to actually make this happen. And then we continued to get more and more support, and we're really grateful for that. And I see some folks from Easton tuning in, and we actually debuted our show. We did our debut performance in Easton with Modern Warrior a couple years back, and that's been a great hub of ours, going back and forth there, and that's a big reason why we're there. So Dennis says, titled, yeah, Man Meets FedEx. Yeah, that's perfect. All right, that's the next production, Emmett. And
There
then
we go.
Christian. So before we shift gear now, specific to this Memorial Day piece that we put together, I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Tri-Seat Jazz Fest Cleveland, who are going into their 41st year of the Jazz Fest here, which is now going to happen in August. We hope that you'll stay tuned to check it out. They've been such an incredible staple of the Cleveland arts community and supporting all different kinds of projects and artists, and also with incredible education initiatives. I'm fortunate to run their Tri-C Jazz Fest Academy. We bring in all kinds of talented and dedicated young musicians from around the region, and give them all kinds of interesting experiences around the Jazz Fest. So we're grateful for that. And thank you so much to All About Jazz, and to Jazz Corner, and to Nighttown Cleveland, and the Bop Stop at the Music Settlement. Nighttown and the folks have been really the kind of the core of helping to build this program out for us. And thank you. And most importantly, thanks to all of you for your individual contributions, which help to create sustainability for this show and this environment. The next piece you'll see was our very first virtual collaboration with Modern Warrior Live, and with Christian, with James, with a wonderful vocalist, Akuya Ulrich, who joins us on a lot of productions. And so as we segue into that, James, I know up until now we've been talking about our show and what the show does to empower, in an effort to empower and honor folks who have served. But I know that the sentiment behind this next piece is quite different as we approach Memorial Day. So can you just put into context what we're about to see and hear, and why you wanted to do this?
Yeah, thanks. And even before I make that shift, I just want to thank Evelyn again, and her father. I'm sure not only has it affected his life, but affected hers. So thank you. But yeah, in making that shift, right, Memorial Day is kind of, it's a unique day, especially for us veterans. It's the only day where it feels kind of weird if someone were to thank you for your service, because a lot of times there's, well, for me personally, there's a sense of guilt associated with it. I'm here and I have friends that aren't. So, that's kind of the first layer. But then as I look at my friends that are no longer here and think about what they would want me to do on Memorial Day, there's even a wide range there, right? Like I have friends that are no longer with us that would want me to have a giant party and remember them. And then I have friends that are no longer with us that would want me to spend time with my parents, or my girlfriend. And so I have all of this kind of swirling around at the same time where I'm trying to remember them. And then there's this larger sense of sacrifice and reverence. You have these ceremonies you go to where you'll have politicians or veterans getting up, talking about the meaning of the day. And so there's a lot going on. Personally, I try to spend the day with loved ones, and I try to enjoy it. But at the same time, there is this sense of kind of inescapable sadness that's kind of in the background the whole time. And so I think we did our best here to try and capture that in this piece.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that, James, and thank you for sharing this very important dialogue here. in narrative. So we'd like to present this to you now. Again, our very first collaboration. And afterwards, I don't want us to say too much. Afterwards, we're going to take just a couple moments, and we hope that you'll join us for the talk back, the after hours talk back. And we appreciate your questions here, which we'll address. So I'd just like to thank everybody in advance for joining us today. And we hope this piece here is impactful to you as it was to each and every one of us in putting this together. So thank you, James, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Great.
On Memorial Day, I begin to miss everyone I've served with, both alive and dead. And even though I'm surrounded by my loved ones, I feel alone again. I'm pulled from my thoughts as I hear someone complain about me being on my phone. They say Memorial Day is about family and being together. I'm not mad. I understand their perception of the day, so I smile and apologize, but quickly go back to the men I served with on my phone. I'm uncomfortable around everyone. And this isn't a new feeling, but it's one that's been absent for quite some time. But now everyone's aware of my sensitivity to the day, and they want to help but don't know how. And so for the rest of it, they're soft with me, and it's uncomfortable. These moments are rare and becoming less frequent, but I still don't know how to deal with them. Maybe I never want to. Every year since on Memorial Day, I find myself looking for balance. It's always personally sad and at the same time a celebration of life and gratitude. I know that the friends we've lost would want us to spend the time we can enjoying our loved ones while we remember them. That provides a little bit of comfort. However, for many of us, there's also a sense of responsibility. But I can't tell you how my friends have sacrificed their lives to protect the men and women next to them. To clarify, it's not that I can't share these memories because it would be too hard, although that's also true. But I can't share these memories because even though they're the ones that weigh most heavily on me, they're not solely mine to share. They belong to the lost ones' friends and families. And for that reason, I can only share them with those closest to me while I attempt to grasp the scope of sacrifice and reverence that the day demands. But no matter what I do, at the end of it, I always find myself waiting in a mixture of guilt, appreciation, love, and sadness. Always sadness.
Thank you for joining us. We're going to take just a couple moments, and we hope you stay with us for the after hours talk back. Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, great. We thank you for joining us, and appreciate all of the beautiful comments. Actually, I just want to read one from Stephen Baylog, man, who's been a great supporter and friend here. We appreciate your comment. I just want to read this in case James and all of you haven't seen it. It says, James, Dominic, and all the Modern Warrior team, thank you for helping us all remember what Memorial Day is about, especially in this time of not being able to gather today to be thankful and reverent. It is so important to give thanks and appreciation for those that have fought and died for our freedom. God bless you all, and thank you. Thank you for that beautiful note, Stephen. Appreciate it. So Judy and Bruce asked, do you remember the first time you played taps in public? Wow. I don't remember the first time I played it in public, but I'll tell you, that is the most difficult piece, I think pretty much the most difficult piece for me to play. There's two levels to it. One is especially playing it at the end of our Modern Warrior production. The production is difficult, I think, for me to get through just on an emotional level, and being in the production and, you know, just hearing James and seeing how all the different musical and visual elements come together. And then I have the responsibility of playing taps at the end. So emotionally, it's challenging to get through. But if I take myself out of the equation, the more difficult thing is that I know the sense of this heavy responsibility that comes with playing this piece. And, you know, on trumpet, of course, it was played, you know, on things far before the trumpet. You know, there's no valves, nothing. It's, you know, it's all just open. And it's such a perfect, pristine piece that I'm so nervous that I'm going to mess up one of the notes, and I'm also nervous that I'm not going to convey the emotional element that it really deserves. So this is it's a real heavy responsibility, I think, to just play it perfectly. And even what you saw there, I feel bad for the people in my apartment building. I probably played that like 30 times yesterday, and I'm still not fully happy with the performance of it. I don't think I ever will be, but I think it's okay, and, you know, it conveys what I needed it to convey. Yeah, it's the kind of thing where you finish playing and say I could have definitely played that better because I know what it stands for. So I don't know exactly the first time I played it.
Hey,
But
Tom.
yes,
Hey,
Christian.
I had a question for you. So you just kind of were reminding me in that question. Uh, for me, the first time we played this show top to bottom,
Mm,
right? Because when we're in, when we first sat with James and we were like working how we were going to put the show together, we kind of did a small version and did the the seed funding version, and then we built the whole thing out to the 90-minute show. When you're in work mode, you kind of get caught up in all the machinacea, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be,
mm,
everybody's, all the, what it is to get ready for the show.
right.
And I was curious, because I know my feeling of the first time I sat at the piano in the moment and actually experience the show live. Like, even though I was running the show, and conducting, I was like watching the show because there's no stops, there's no, all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So I was curious if you remember that first time that, I mean, not even like a dress rehearsal, but the first time we literally had to go top to bottom, like, did you realize what you had put together at that point? When did this really hit you? Because for me, it was that first show when I walked away after you played taps and realized just, whoa, we just did something so impactful. So do you remember what was it? What was that moment for you? Is it the same? I was just curious.
Yeah. That's interesting. The moment for me was actually the moment I met James in that bar before he brought me back and showed me his guns, which kind of freaked me out because I get scared of guns. But thank you, James. But
Yeah, no
yeah,
problem.
when we had that conversation, I said, man, the way how articulate he is and the way that I'm like having the privilege of getting into his mind and how he thinks about things, and I realized I haven't heard that, the way that he frames this whole show and his thoughts. I haven't really heard that in the sound bites that we hear kind of in the media when we're talking about veterans. So that was the moment I'm like, wow, this is an incredibly special human being with an incredible and unique way of delivering, and I knew that it was going to be something special. That said, when we were sitting in the bar then talking, I couldn't imagine that it would have turned out the way that it did. But that was certainly the starting point. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Christian. I know what you mean about that first time in the Out Cult Theater at Playhouse Square in Cleveland
Yeah.
when we debuted it, and
Yeah, we all walked off and we're just like, whoa.
right,
And
right,
James was too. Like, we all just kind of had to take a moment
yeah,
because first of all, so I just have to say this. The moment that moved me the most was when you started to play taps and the veterans in the audience stood.
mm-hmm.
I,
Yes,
I still to this day, that moment will forever be etched in my nothing like that has ever moved me more. And
mm-hmm.
knowing you were trying to get through taps and I was just playing the piano trying to get through it. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
moments that are very moving for this production. So yeah, just curious.
Dom, I have a question for James, which is James, how do you, I mean, how do you separate the feeling of, like, on the one hand, doing a professional show or performance, a show must go on and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that what they're talking about is your story. I mean, is it like every night do you get dragged through that whole range of emotions, or at some point are you able to separate the two, so that you don't, it doesn't take such a toll on you every time you do the darn great show?
Yeah, thanks. So I don't separate them, but I do have to limit what I go through emotionally when we do the show. So I kind of put a cap on it. But in order to do that, and I think this is good practice for anyone in general dealing with any trauma, there's a kind of a maintenance routine. Every couple months or so, I need to let myself revisit that. I need to let myself be sad. I need to be able to think about that stuff, because if I don't, and like so often in going through the military, you have these things that start to boil up, and you just naturally suppress them. You keep doing the job, you keep suppressing them, and then you start to have those side effects of that. So in order to not have those side effects and be able to get through the performance, I have to kind of let it out every once in a while. Today, for example, I got on earlier around 4:30, made sure the lighting was good, did a quick sound check, and then I jumped on my Harley and rode for an hour and 20 minutes and came back and settled into this. So it's really just about keeping the right balance there, to make sure that I can reel it back in when I need to. Yeah.
One more question, just real quick, which is that, yet it's a positive show. It's a show with, it's too simple to call it a happy ending, but you have that wonderful clip from General Mattis. And I'm wondering if you could talk to the folks about that for a moment, because for all the trauma and all the dark places and all that, it has a positive point to it. And this show, I'm wondering if you could just talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. I think, as a society, I think we've done a good job of trying to take care of our veterans, and a lot of that's been normalizing the issues around mental health. But I think one of the unintended side effects there is, as somebody comes out and they're going through these issues, care providers, they want to make sure that they're providing that safety net, and they want to make sure that they're not losing anyone. And I think sometimes, not even medically, we can kind of overprescribe. And in doing that, and getting those labels attached to us, the label of PTSD, the label of depression, and any medications that may come with that, it's really easy to look to those examples that I mentioned earlier, those damaged examples or the liability examples, and say, okay, this is what I am now. And the other thing that you're dealing with when you get out of the military, it's almost like a retirement of sorts. You're leaving one way of life and you have to find a way to start a new one. And if you're in that transition and someone's giving you these labels, it's easy to just allow yourself to become what people are telling you should be, and live in that space. So, for me, I was fortunate that I was able to kind of see that it was an opportunity to start something new, and really, take those building blocks that I had and start to move in a different direction with them, while being aware of the challenges that I was going to have. And I've been fortunate enough to come out in a good place.
Thanks.
And so we'd like to play another clip for you from the production, and kind of dovetailing on James's talk about mental health and mental wellness. We have one question from Valerie. Said, what inspired you to make the connection between James's story and A Soldier's Things? And thank you for that question. A Soldier's Things is a song by Tom Waits from a great album from 1983, Swordfish Trombones. And it was when I first heard that song, I was getting ready to record it for my last album. And lyrically, it's about a soldier coming back from war and dealing with the realities and challenges of reacclimating. But the connection there is that's what inspired me to dig deeper and to learn more about this. And that's why I reached out to our mutual friend and who introduced me to James, because I wanted to learn more about this world that I never really thought about before. The thing about Tom Waits and Leonard Cohen and so many of these artists that we chose the music from is that their lyrics can be taken in a literal sense, but it's more like poetry in that you can really get so many different things in your own life out of it. Tom Waits in particular writes lyrics that most of the time on the surface you don't know what the hell he's talking about, but they resonate with you. Even though you don't know exactly what he's talking about. And this next example is an example of some of the material that we chose for the production that specifically kind of serves that purpose. We don't want it to be too literal. We don't want you to have a specific attachment or a specific image in mind as you're hearing it. We want you to hear it and embrace the context of what you've seen and in context of the story and kind of internalize it that way. So this is actually a good example of this. This is another Tom Waits song that we incorporated in the production, and this is an excerpt of Low Side of the Road. Check out the lyrics.
I'm searching for some new anchor. I buy a new sports car. Start driving through areas where I stand out. Areas people tell me I shouldn't go. One night, as I'm pulling out of a plaza, a prostitute approaches the driver's side of my car as a dealer tries to sell me coke through the passenger window. And although I appreciate that neither of them care about the loaded Glock on my console, I decline their offers. But I know that the three of us understand violence, which makes me feel closer to myself in their world.
I'm on a black elevator going down. Little Joe from Kokomo is rattled to the ground. The dice is laughing at the man that he throws. I'm rolling over to the low side of the road. The moon is red and you're dancing real slow. 29 miles left to go. And the chain monkeys help you with your load. You're rolling over to the low side of the road. Jezebel is naked with an axe. The prosecution, they tell you to relax. Your head feels like it's bound to explode. You're rolling over. You're rolling over.
Just packed with, I don't know. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Low Side of the Road. Those lyrics are just packed with, I don't know what, but it just like gets you, you know? And James, what you're talking about the mental wellness of this piece, I see Dr. Patrick Palmieri actually popped up here in the in our Zoom audience. Oh, he can't. Okay. Actually, I was going to hopefully, okay. I was hoping he was going to do it. Okay. Okay. No mic. Okay. Well, anyway, we have Dr. Patrick Palmieri, who's the director of the, down at Summa Health, director of the Traumatic Stress Center. And so he's been an advisor, a medical advisor to this entire production. And because after each show, we always do a Q&A, and we do our best to really integrate with different healthcare providers in every area of the country that we go to, because we see what this show kind of brings out of people and how it empowers and creates and kind of stokes the fire of the conversation. So he's been really instrumental in helping to kind of break down the different aspects of this show. And James, actually, can you just yeah, I'd like to hear just from you briefly about the different aspects that Dr. Palmieri has talked about in terms of like what you're actually doing on stage, how that translates to the mental health world.
Yeah, thanks. Hopefully he's going to send me notes after this and let me know what I'm getting wrong here. But I appreciate that. Yeah, and I appreciate the prostitute and cocaine clip to tuck nicely in there.
Yeah, I just had to get that in there.
Thank you.
In case your mom is watching.
That's great. Hi, Mom. I didn't. Anyway, Yeah, it went over real well at the high schools too. But yeah, man, the elements that Dr. Palmieri brought up, he brought up the cognitive processing therapy elements, and but more importantly, the exposure therapy elements. And I think, again, obviously, I'm not an expert in this field, but I think what I'm doing on stage most closely aligns with the exposure therapy. In the sense that I'm talking about traumas first person, present tense. I'm reliving them. To Lauren's point earlier about what the music does, not only am I talking about these, but I have a soundtrack behind me reminding me more of these moments in my life. And every night when we do the show, it is therapeutic. And in some ways, it's a bit of that maintenance that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. And that, yeah, it's really valuable to bring these worlds together. I mean, it's the same world, but in terms of like what we're doing and how it's been impacting folks and the programs that Modern Warrior Live Foundation is building out to kind of have the proper follow up here. Yeah, Nikki mentioned, and this is really beautiful. So many families and veterans have benefited from Modern Warrior Live. The gift the team brings to those who have sacrificed in their families makes it all worth the effort. Every performance changes a life, and I have witnessed the magic so many times. Yeah, Stacy and I will never be the same, and yet you all are wonderful, and Stacy and Scott and the whole team, wonderful. So ordinarily, I don't read. I don't read quotes and things about productions that I'm involved with. It seems a little weird, but this thing is obviously not about me. It's much bigger. And in terms of the purpose that we're serving. And, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and also Vietnam vet Anthony Principi, he said, Modern Warrior reminds veterans they are not victims and can use their experiences to grow and make significant contributions to society. We got audience feedback, and one gentleman said that seeing the show was one of the most moving, touching experiences regarding war that I have felt since returning from Vietnam 46 years ago. These kinds of comments happen every single show. And, we see the huge responsibility that comes with really not only delivering a great show, but creating beneficial programs that could kind of, build out those next steps. And great. I saw a question earlier for Lauren. Lauren, somebody was asking about, so about history of military music and jazz, notable performances. I don't know too much about this. I'm curious.
Well, it's funny, not funny. Going back to World War One, there was a man named James Reese Europe, and without going into a long jazz history rap here, some people say he was the first Duke Ellington. He had a grand vision for American music, and long story short, he took an African American, a group of African American and Hispanic soldiers over to Europe during World War One. They played the St. Louis Blues March, they swung it. They participated in World War One. They came back to great acclaim. And then because the fact that, America was and still is in many ways a racist country, they never really got the credit for what they deserved. The military was still segregated at that time. Now, in World War II, Glenn Miller, the famous Glenn Miller, did a similar thing where he gave up his famous band and went over to Europe and played for the soldiers. They played the St. Louis Blues. I don't think they fought like James Reese Europe guys did. And they wound up being the star of, there was the Glenn Miller story with James Stewart. Well, it's a long way of saying that jazz and the military have long been intertwined. It's a story of the military. It's a song about race. It's a story about race. And it's a story about the other. And this is something that I know James dealt with because I was going through some of James's things that he wrote, and about how you deal with someone who's different, and the people that he dealt with over, when he was on the other side of the world in the war, and how we're all the other at some point. And there have not been many famous musicians, jazz musicians, served in the military. I'm not aware of any ones who were famous who passed away, but that's probably because they were young men, and if they had come back, then they might have become famous or well known. But that's kind of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And James, as we close out here, so I know we've gone through a lot about the Modern Warrior production, and then segueing into the Memorial Day piece. I think for all of us who are listening, and as a veteran, what do you want us to take away from? I guess two sides of the question. Number one, what do you want us to take away from the production, the Modern Warrior live production, and specifically this new Memorial Day piece that we've created together?
Yeah, I think for both of them, the goal is to really focus on, the similarities between all of us, and while trying to build empathy. I'm trying to share my perspective to the best of my ability in a way where individuals can hopefully see bits of themselves in my life, and if they can't, hopefully they have a better understanding of what individuals like myself have gone through, and beyond that, I think it's really just coming back to the commonality between us, and as I think about Memorial Day specifically in that piece, I encourage everyone to to spend time with their loved ones over the weekend and tomorrow. Do what makes them happy, but make sure that they cherish those loved ones while they're there, and keep in mind the individuals that aren't with theirs.
Well, thank you very much, James. We appreciate your
Thanks.
time, and we're grateful to have Evelyn with us. Thank you, Evelyn Wright. And thank you, Lauren Schoenberg. Thank you, Christian Tamber, for joining us as well, and for all your wonderful work on our collaboration. Thank you to Emmett Murphy, our director, and also Robert Bouleguer, who's been an incredible asset to our Songbook Watch Party team. Thank you to all of you for joining us week after week, and for your support. We encourage you to visit songbookwatchparty.com, and if you're enjoying this program and you're feeling inspired by this programming and want to see it continue, we appreciate your contributions in helping to make it sustainable. And we appreciate all of your contributions so far to get us to this stage. We're just starting out, and we're really excited to have some wonderful artists. Next week, a wonderful pianist, Tamir Hendelman, will be joining, as well as this incredibly gifted trumpeter from Venezuela, Linda Briseño, who's based in New York, and just won a Grammy Award for Latin Grammy Award for Producer of the Year. And all kinds of wonderful talent will be coming through the next upcoming months. So thank you all so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. And we hope that you enjoy the day and the time with your family and loved ones. I'm Dominic Farinacci. This is Songbook Watch Party. Thank you very much.